Hey, everybody, welcome to Pianist Academy. I'm Charles Szczepanek. It's nothing like being live. About 30 seconds ago, my coffee went down the wrong way. So bear with me while I get my voice back over the next 5 minutes. Anyway, welcome. We've got a cool session today. We're going to hear from Bethany playing a new piece of original music. And Alan is going to play for us. It's his first time here. I see we've already got some people in the chat. So welcome, Rhodesy and C Drive and Nancy. Antonio, welcome. By the way, yeah, in the chat, Rhodesy had asked, what is 424 like on this video title? What does that mean? And C Drive is correct. 424 is today's date, April 24th. Hello, David. Hello, Bedlington Groomer. See, the voice is already coming back. All right. Yes, so Rhodesy, if it was 7/27 like last year, that would have been, what, July 27th. I know a lot of you aren't in the U.S., and you the dates are flipped between countries. So because I'm in the U.S., I put the month first and the day second. But that's just, yeah. I know that's different for everybody. So anyway, that's why you see that in the titles. Welcome, Bethany. Good to see you. Welcome, Rob. Hello. Why don't we, before we get started with today's stuff, tell me a little bit of what all of you are practicing these days. I'll give you a little head start with that. So while you're thinking and typing in the chat, what is a piece maybe you worked on today or yesterday or this week? Something I'm working on, and Bethany actually kind of already knows this, is more Mendelssohn, Opus 19, number 3. Number 4 I already put out on the channel. It goes a little like this. A little bit like that. Fun stuff. So what are you practicing? Hello, Alan. Welcome. Bethany says, are you still planning to record them? Yes, at some point. Number 1 is well on its way to being great. Number 2, I don't spend as much time on. Number 3 is on the way. Number 4 is done. Number 5 is the most challenging one. And that's one that if you saw some shorts I was working on, I haven't actually touched it much in the last couple of weeks. But, and then number 6 is a beautiful barcarolle. So yeah, I would love to record all of them. We'll see how that project fits in with everything else. But that's kind of a side passion project, I guess. Nancy says, Gymnopédie, number 1 and number 2 and 3. Great. Some Satie. Love some Satie. Bennington Groomer says, practicing Your Park Bench. That's a piece that I wrote. Thanks, Bennington Groomer. Yes, and because I'm your teacher, I do know that. I'm glad to hear you're practicing it. David, Field Nocturne. Very nice. David, what made you choose a Field Nocturne? Is this the first one by John Field that you've worked on, or have you worked on any of the other ones? Bethany, you say you're still practicing the same darn accompaniment for a French choir piece and trying to improve scales. Nice. And Rob, Bergmüller's Arabesque. A nice staple of the repertoire. Lovely. Well, if anyone else wants to share, feel free to jump in. Let's see. David says, you played it years ago and you're trying to get it back. Beautiful. I have never studied. I've listened to all of the Field Nocturnes, but I've never actually performed any of them. So that would be fun to take a look at. C Drive says, working on a Lux Aeterna from Requiem for a Dream. Nice. And some Bach. And June is working on some Bach. Different Bach. I believe that's CPE Bach, right? And Bedlington Groomer says, yes, you practiced for an hour. Love to hear that. All right. Well, that is awesome stuff. Such a variety from Satie to Bach to Field to French choral music. Stephen. Welcome, Stephen. Absolutely. My pleasure, Stephen. Hope you'll stick around we'll be here for an hour and a half or 2 hours. And feel free to ask some questions. If you can't stay right now, come back in an hour when we open it up for a full Q&A. speaking of that, why don't we jump in and let's hear Bethany's new piece. Bethany, I believe this is called, is it called Waiting? I haven't pulled the sheet music up yet, but I believe it's called Waiting. Yes, it is. All right. So we're going to listen to Bethany play a new original composition, and I will give a little bit of feedback, and then we'll go from there. All right. Sounds great. Oh, let's give Bethany a round of applause. Really nice piece of music. Lovely playing. Bethany, you got some great comments. Rhodesy said, wonderful. Bedlington Groomer said, so pretty, lovely. Antonio loved it. Yes. David loved it. Awesome. I think you've got some fans here, Bethany. And by the way, Sindin, welcome. I did see your comment right after we started Bethany's piece. Einaudi is great. And I bet you enjoyed Bethany's piece that you heard as well, if you like Einaudi stuff. Alex, welcome. All right, Bethany, my comments, I think, are going to be, I don't have too many, I don't think. I'll just go from the beginning, and we'll go from there. Overall, it's really lovely. I don't think if you asked anybody who just heard this, I don't think anybody would tell you, maybe if I call it your concern, which was that this was only one theme. Did anybody here, listening, did you hear only a single theme through that entire piece? 5 minutes. Or did it feel much more expansive than that? Drop what you thought in the chat. I felt like it was much more expansive than that. And I get when we analyze it, yes, we have basically 2 themes that are woven together, and they repeat throughout the piece with relatively little variation. That's something I think that makes the piece really successful, actually, is that it becomes familiar really quickly for us. And that's really nice. And those 2 themes, if I split those out for everybody, we have one that's in the left hand. That one. And the one that enters in the right hand here. See, Antonio, subscribe to your channel, Bethany. Great stuff. So those are the 2 basic themes we have. They're great. And I love, Bethany, I'll show the music on here maybe for a little bit, but your mood and tempo description is resigned and chant-like. And I love that too. Let me see. Sindin said, yes, love it. Great comment, Sindin. And Nancy said it reminded you of movie soundtracks and of your favorite movie soundtracks. Great stuff. Okay, so first things first. I will put the sheet music up. So Bethany, you did this, and this is a performance thing, first off. You did this a few times later in the piece, but right at the beginning, to make sure that we really distinctly hear the inner melody being brought out, you could divide that between the 2 hands. I don't think you necessarily need to rewrite that. You could just say right hand takes stem up, left hand takes stem down. And you could say, I think it's easier to play with the left hand over the right hand. Obviously, we need to be able to articulate it with the left hand by itself too, because when the rest of everything comes in, we have to be able to play that. But right at the beginning, and any time that you have those free measures, you might consider adding that hand division in there. So there's a bunch of places that can happen, just to make sure that we really distinctly hear that inner voice that we want to be brought out and not the repeated fifths, right? And yes, Bethany, you did do that at the end of the piece. Let me see where that was. It was, right, last few bars. You did do it right there. So take a look. Whether you notate that or not, it's up to you. But I do think that's a performance thing that could be helpful to convey more easily that inner melody, so we don't have to worry about voicing up an inner note of a chord, which, as you know, it's very difficult to do that and do it really consistently. Oh, let's see. Quentin, you said you only hear the sound of the piano in your right ear. Oh, that might be true. Let me see if I can fix that. Are there other people having that problem? Give me just a second. I'm going to mute myself for like 5 seconds. How about now? Better? I think I fixed the problem. Thanks for the heads up. Let's see. Rhodesy said it's in C major. No, Bethany says it's in A minor. Yes, great. Sound better? Okay, wonderful. Thanks for that. Okay, great. Let's move on. So Bethany, next thing that I noticed, jumping down the page, this is still on our first page. Again, more of a performance thing, I think, than a compositional thing. We have such a nice texture with the pedal. I'm getting in measure 17 right now, into 18. I'm wondering if it seemed a little abrupt that we would cut off the left hand. So that could be a performance thing if we can release the pedal a little more gradually. We might be able to blend that release a little bit more so it's not as abrupt. But I'd also consider I get why you want the chord to go away for the last two notes instead of having it hang out. So yeah, let's leave it as just a pedaling thing. If you can release that a little bit more clearly, not clearly, a little bit more gradually and smoothly, so that it is less of a clear pedal change and not, but. And feel free, the right hand might blur a little bit more than your recording of this, but I think it'll still be nice. And I think it'll still have your desired intention there, which is for the melody to be alone for that beat-ish. Okay, first compositional thing. Getting into, this is our kind of our second statement. So we're looking at measure 24 and on. And I wrote in the score right now, more resonance with a question mark. So after we've heard all of this, I know that we've changed our harmonic progression here. I would love if we potentially explored something a little bit lower in register. So that's a very small change. I'll write in the notation first. It's only 2 notes I think that I added, but I think they can make a big difference in helping us grow into what's to come and add a little bit more variety to this second statement. So what I did here is I believe I'm going to erase this. And I think all I did was add, the lower octave. Just there, and then where the chord changes. That, of course, requires the division between the hands to be a bit different. So I believe then I took that with the right hand, and this definitely with the right hand, and moved this A up, which, of course, breaks the line a little bit, but we still get that tonality, if you will. Oh, sorry, not the A there, but the F and down. So let me play that again. Yeah, Bethany said, it's tricky but doable. Just need to practice yet. Yes. So That would be one compositional suggestion, not changing any of the harmony, but just expanding our register a little bit so that this second statement, we get a little bit of a hint at where we're going next. Now, how far we continue that can be up to you for a little bit, and how you continue to divide things between the hands. I do think we should come back to the register that you've written at the top of the next page, especially probably here for the D major chord. That's the first time we get D major in the piece. There we go. And that's just such a lovely change in color, and I love the inversion, and I wouldn't want it to be any different than how you wrote it. So, if there's a way that from the bottom of the page we can expand and maybe make the downbeat of 39 the last time we get an octave lower pitch. And then we can really bring the voicing back up. And I think that'll help balance really nicely where you go in the next statement, where we move to these eighth notes. Oh, perfect. I just saw your comments, Bethany. Great. Yes. So, as we move into the next segment, this is all really lovely. My only thought is you have such a nice mixed meter that you've used in the opening statements. Would it be possible somewhere to throw in a bar of 2 occasionally? Maybe not exactly in the same pattern that you've done earlier, so the pattern can mix up a little bit. We can add a beat, but can we hint back to that mixed meter that we had earlier in the piece? Maybe not there. That could be one. That was in measure 58. That's just an idea, but something that helps to harken back to that same feeling that we had. It was the mixed meter almost, while it's still like reflective and chant-like and, like you said, resigned, there's this feeling still of unsettledness because of that mixed meter. And I'd love that to continue here and there, if we call this the B section. Once again, where we change harmony from A minor, or your harmonization, from F here. We start in F. And then we're in D. We cadence in A. And we go back to F, but this time F7, major 7. That would be another place I consider adding something lower. I know this is predicting a little bit of where you're going to go. I'll put the sheet music back up for everybody. So I'm currently talking about this measure, 62, as another spot. That we maybe could add something lower, some way of expanding this. And then, maybe when we get here, this is 67, 68. That's another place where we could throw in a bigger octave in the left hand. Now, that being said, I know I'm kind of going on and on about adding notes in the bottom, and I'm just talking octaves, but something that I would want to be careful of is I wouldn't want to go too far before the big moment that you wrote leading into 90. So I think that can be balanced a little bit by the dynamic you play. So if we add lower octaves where we're getting into this extreme low register of the keyboard, that we keep the dynamic in check, right? And then this can still be a big moment. It can still be the lowest pitch we ever hear and have a really dramatic impact. But we might be able to help lead to it. I'm going to say that with, let's say, like a grain of salt, because there isn't really anything wrong with the way it's currently written. And there could be an argument made that because you've postponed this sinking into that extreme low register, that maybe it's more impactful. So we're trying to find a balance between those two things, maintaining the impact of what you wrote, especially when you approach 90, because it is by far the widest use of registration. But also, if there is a way that we can foreshadow it a little bit, I think that would be nice, because that foreshadowing would also help to add just a touch more variation also to the previous lines. I think I just have one more thought, Bethany. So after this big moment in measure 90, we have everything. You might maybe consider writing a pedal marking here. I know you haven't written in them anywhere else, but if you don't want the pedal changed every bar, without pedal marked there, just like either one marking and then with a release mark later, like here. Or you could do the typical like line if you want it to be ultra clear, that you want all of that pedaled. If that pedal marking is not there, there's a chance that someone playing this, if they didn't listen to your recording, they might play a new pedal that has its own effect, but I don't think that's what you're going for. Let's see. Bethany, you said, where would you release the pedal? Yeah, I think I'd hold everything, and I think that's what you did on your recording, is we put the pedal down in 90, and you played everything. You say you've played that line many different ways. If you would like to leave it up to the performer's discretion, don't put a marking and leave it up to them. If you do find that you like that resonance, I would make sure that you write that to be continued throughout. Or if you really can't decide, but you want to make sure that someone else knows there's an option to do both, you could write even just like optional pedal, or you could put in parentheses. Let me clear some of this. You could put in parentheses before these notes some dotted halves that are tied. Just let vibrate ties. Sometimes they're longer, sometimes they're shorter. It's a tie that goes to nothing. It's not tied to another note. And that implies that that low note would ring until the performer decides otherwise. And if you put it in parentheses, then you could even, if that's not clear enough or you don't feel it's clear enough, add a little note at the bottom of the page about that bar in particular. But I do think that's something for sure to consider there. And you say, you do mean to hold some pedal through till the fourth beat of 97. Okay, yeah. Then mark that. Absolutely mark that. Because if you don't, like I said, people might pedal every bar. And especially where you've marked grand pause, they will definitely lift the pedal there. if not told to hold. So, I think my only other comment here was in 97, now that we've gotten there. In 97, I think I like the marking of very free and wistful. I think the notation is fine. Possibly we could play it a little bit more quickly because there's so much time. I think we might feel like this becomes the end and we're not sure where it goes. I'd go both ways, I guess. If I was playing this live for people, I would not take as much time because listeners tend to get a little antsy if they've been listening to a performance and watching a performance. If there's a lot of time taken, it can lead people to, one, maybe like start applauding in the wrong place. People can relax and release all the breath they've been holding, which would be a good thing. We're doing a good job if people are on the edge of their seat and kind of holding their breath a little bit. And we don't want them to release that, right? This is the moment right after the big climax. So it's a nice juxtaposition against all the movement and against the expansiveness of writing and registration. But perhaps the fermata might be a little shorter. Maybe think about it as if this is being played by either an instrumentalist or a singer, someone that needs to use air to get through the line, instead of maybe like a string player, where there's kind of infinite bow changes they can take. If we think about it in that context, it might push us a little bit more through those lines. Not as much as we're going to feel when the tempo primo comes back, and that structure is there again. Right? But I think we can still get the same effect you want of this hanging in the air and lack of direction, but we can still go through it a little bit more quickly. Bethany, I think I would still chop it. I think I would still chop it up. Because when we do chop it, we can make it more human and natural because we can give it breath. And I think that's really important. If it's one really long phrase, I'd hesitate to do that. Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to catch up a little bit on the chat. Yeah. Okay. I think we got everything there. Yeah, so I think that's all. Yeah, that's all of my notes. And I don't think we've been talking about expanding the registration. I don't think that should happen at the end. I think we've done enough that we just enjoy the smaller voicing from where the theme picks back up again and takes us to the very end. Bethany, do you have any questions? Let's give Bethany another round of applause. It's really, really lovely stuff, and a wonderful way of exploring what's possible with a single theme. David says, is this going to be for sale at some point? Bethany, do you already have this sheet music available? I saw your note at the bottom of the page that you wrote it last year. Wonderful applause. Yes. You say no questions. Okay. Great stuff. Oh, Bethany, you said you wrote it a couple. Yeah, the bottom of your pages say March of 2023. So that's why I said last year. But I mean, great to hear that it's so fresh. Bethany, and feel free to, if drop, like I always say, if you can, drop a link to your YouTube page in the first comment below the video. So not in the chat, because the chat scrolls and people can't find that as easily later. But if you can, in that first comment under the video, please leave it, and that way, like, David can go find it. And David, I'm sure if you search Bethany's name in YouTube, you will also find her page, which I'm sure will also have links to purchase a whole bunch of Bethany's music, because you've been writing for quite a while, years, right, Bethany? When did you write your first piece of music? I think that will also shed some light on how much you've been exploring this, especially for some of the people here that I know are more beginner players and earlier in their compositional journey. David says you're already subbed. Great. And Rotsi, who say you love how the two of you and Bethany, make completely different music. It is different. It is different. Yeah. And David, you also follow our MuseScore. Wonderful. So, yeah, Bethany, let us know when you started writing. So we can have that in a little bit of context, and then we'll jump over and take a listen to our next submission. Rotsi, I don't use MuseScore for notation, and I don't put anything up there. I haven't looked at it super heavily, but I publish all my stuff on my own website and on Music Notes. And for those of you who are familiar with Octave, I actually just signed with them yesterday. And so there's going to be a whole lot of my stuff available on their subscription platform soon. I don't know when. Probably within a few weeks. That's Octave, OKTAV. Yeah, Rhodesy, it is a little tricky to sell. It takes a little bit of work to get it set up, but it's worth it. Bethany, you say 6 or 7 years ago, you found MuseScore and started writing stuff down. You had to write down a duet so someone could play it. Yes. That sounds good. Sinden said, so you teach composition as well. I think that's to me, right, Sinden? Yes, I do. I've taught composition for the last 15 years or so. Yeah. And Sinden, I also have, maybe 50 originals that I've written over the last 10 to 12 years, and maybe 60 to 80 arrangements I've written in the last same amount of time. And I'm kind of with Bethany. I actually wrote albums worth of stuff, and I never notated anything down. I just had things on like a little sheet of loose leaf paper with some chord changes, and didn't notate them for years after. And now, these days, I don't write anything without notating it at the same time while I'm writing it. Sinden says, "Are you good at improving as well?" I can improv in a few styles, but not jazz, and not like Baroque classical, maybe not even Romantic classical. But I play around, and I can play. That's actually how a lot of my own compositions start, is with improv. But I wouldn't say I wouldn't do it in public, let's say. Because things don't exactly always go where my head wants them to. My hands don't always follow where my head wants them to go. Awesome. So yeah, great work, Bethany. And we will be looking forward to hearing from you again, for sure. I always love hearing your music. And it's interesting because it always kind of takes a variety of shapes and styles. It's still you, but it goes in some different directions, which I think is really cool. And Rhodes, you say you improv a lot on the public piano. That's great. That takes a lot of guts. And Bethany says if you try to improvise at church, it goes a little haywire. Church is one place that I have improvised. Usually, like if I'm playing a hymn or whatever it is, and you get the chord changes are already there, and I know what I've played, and I'll just go with it for a second. But as far as like if somebody were to ask me to improvise in the style of Chopin and write a ballade, that would not happen. That would take some serious thought. So Alan, for all improvisers, and this also will answer Alan's question. For anybody that improvises, it comes down to a really, really intrinsic almost knowledge of your scales, arpeggios, and not just like we usually talk about major and minor scales and that stuff, but not just those, like all of your different modes. So your major, minor, Dorian, Lydian, Mixolydian, etc. Knowing all of those, and also being able to navigate through common chord changes, playing runs. So playing, for example, a jazz pianist will be able to play runs through the 2-5-1 chord progression, and they'll practice that. That's a tremendous amount of what a jazz pianist will practice are different patterns of runs in all of the keys, and then they'll practice runs and improving over 2-5-1 chord progressions. So when it comes time for them to improvise, it's actually how I would describe it, and this is, again, I have not lived that life, so this is an outsider's perspective, but how I would describe it as pulling a lot of pieces that you're really familiar with and putting them together in a new way on the spot. But it's not like it's not completely like out of the blue. They have a great idea. Jazz pianists have a great idea of how to execute everything. Their ear tells them, we're going to go in this direction. They have a very concise, probably not even cue that they say out loud in their mind. They just know we're going to whatever chord, X chord. And then their hands know what to do because it's been practiced for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. So it's the same for classical pianists and people studying classical, how we practice repertoire. We practice repertoire that's pre-written and a lot of times difficult. And if we spend all of that time practicing like a condensed version of four-bar passages, and then practice those in every key, we'd be great improvisers. Yeah, Bethany said, because you kept the harmony pretty diatonic. Yeah, it still sounds great. And I'm a huge fan of really tonal music. That's what I love. That's what I write. I don't think that we've explored everything that there is to write in tonal music. I think there's a lot of places we can still go and write new and beautiful things. And I think all the time, composers for film and media are always showing us that as well, because a lot of that stuff is still tonal music, just a little bit more expanded language, but it's still tonal. Wonderful. Great. Let's move over to Alan for something completely different. Alan is working on Clementi's Sonatina, Opus 36, number 3. You have to go downstairs, you say, Alan. Does that mean you're coming back or you're going to your keyboard? You'll be back in 2 minutes. Okay, Alan, I'm still going to put your performance up, which you already know how that sounds. So we're listening to Alan play the first movement of Clementi's Opus 36, number 3. And yeah, let's just jump in and take a listen. All right, lovely, lovely, Alan. I hope you're back. Let's give Alan a round of applause. Very nice work. Yes, and you got a couple comments, Alan. Is it Luis? Said, beautiful. Yes. Nice work. How many of you here have played this piece before? It's a very commonly studied piece around, I think, RCM grade 6 or so. I definitely played it many years ago. I would bet that at least a couple of you here have. David says Clementi is fun to play. Yes. So Alan, first off, Bethany says you played it. Yeah, great. Alan, I love that you seem to be enjoying playing it. That's really wonderful. Alex said you played it. Also, great stuff. So yeah, Alan, I love that you enjoy it, and I love you can see it in your expression and in your body language, and I love that. We're going to come back to that in a minute. The first thing I want to point out, Alan, is that I think you have a wrong note. Oh, I lost my. Give me a second. I lost my feed from my iPad. There's a note that I don't think you... I know there were a couple tiny little mistakes in there. This one, I think, was one that you didn't intend. So I've got it circled on the page here. I don't have measure numbers on my score, but that should be an F natural in the left hand, and I believe you played an F sharp. So just be sure... Check out one. I have a couple different scores of Clementi, and I double checked while you were playing that it's truly supposed to be an F natural. So hopefully in your score it also says F natural and not F sharp. So, oh man, that's true. Yes. So that's just a small thing to fix. Embrace that new harmony. It's actually predicted by... Where did my pencil go? There it is. It's predicted by the previous measure. So you can use the previous measure as a little bit of a cue. Where here we have F naturals, especially that D minor chord. So try to remember that D minor chord as a cue for your left hand, that it's also going to play F natural. Yes? Great. Okay. Let's go back to the beginning. The biggest thing I think that's going to help you with this, Alan, is in both hands. Rotzi said he loved scales. Absolutely. All the classical composers did. So at both hands, Alan, we have a very, very low bridge. So these knuckles, they're really low. And that puts a lot of strain on the tendons, and you can feel it up the arm. And what happens is if we're playing with a low bridge and a high wrist, which I think is what most often you're doing, we have to really lift the fingers to get them out of the way. And anytime we have to do faster passage work and we have to lift and play, that's just a C major scale, but it's bar 2, that's really difficult to play. It's somewhat actually remarkable that you're playing it as fast as you are through this current technique. So if you can finesse this a little bit, where the bridge can, instead of being low like this, pop it up. And the wrist is our nice cushion. So here's a couple exercises for that. And I've talked about these on other streams, so some of you might be familiar. But sometimes, so we have a lot of joints in the fingers. We don't want any of the joints collapsing. We want them all firm and strong. So we can start with taking... You know what? I might be able to show you more easily this way. So thumb, second finger, put them together like this, and we can pulse through that and make sure that all of this in the second finger stays strong. And it's almost impossible to have it break doing this exercise. It's almost impossible to have this, which would be the bridge. It's just rotated, right? It's almost impossible for it to break. And we make sure that these smaller knuckles stay nice and firm. So we pulse short pulses, I'm kind of moving my hand so you can see every time I pulse. Go through each finger against the thumb. This was an exercise, actually, that is in a book that Liszt wrote, of all places. So this comes right from Franz Liszt. Keeping all of the joints in the fingers firm so that they can withstand strikes against the keys. Okay, the other thing is, it's two more things. Alan, when you play, before you start playing, let's say like the first couple measures of the piece, take your hands and shake them out and put them on the keyboard and make sure from this position of rest that our bridge is where it should be. The bridge or the big knuckles. So you can see how they are on top and they form like what we sometimes, it'll be called the arch or curved fingers or whatnot, right? Curved fingers don't matter. They don't help us at all if the bridge is collapsed. Curved fingers also don't help us if they're over curved and the wrist is up. So we want to avoid both of those things, the collapsed bridge with the wrist, even with the wrist up like that. We want to avoid that. And we want to avoid the wrist high with over curved fingers like this. Okay, so we come back. The way to find that position, shake out your hand, bring it at rest up to the keyboard. When it's not doing anything, take a look at what that looks like. Feel what it feels like. This is easier said than done, I know, but that is where we want to try to keep our hand as we navigate all of our music. From here, right? Okay, last thing. If you take your other hand, let's say we're working on remembering that the bridge needs to stay supported. We're going to take the other hand, put it below those big knuckles on the other side. Ellen, that's okay. That's okay. You'd be surprised. Maybe a lot of you would be surprised. Ellen just said, dang, I've been playing with the collapsed bridge for 4 years. Ellen, do you have a teacher? Because if you do, shame on them for not helping you with this. And if you don't, congratulations for accomplishing a tremendous amount already. And I'm glad that we're getting a chance to talk about it. So you say, no teacher? Great. Then there is no reason that you would have ever come across this or that you would have known about it beforehand. So you can take the other hand, put it on those fingers. Oh, Alan, there's no fault, Alan. No fault. It's, self-teaching is a journey in and of itself. And so I'm just here to help you go to the next level, right? So take those fingers. We're on the bottom side of those knuckles. We can flip the hand over. Those fingers, we can feel them push up on the hand, right? And if we feel that little bit of pressure, just a little bit, not like we're not jamming our fist into our hand or something like that. This is different than, sometimes you'll see in method books, many of you, if you're working on method books or something, they'll say, make a fist with one hand, put the other hand over it, and you get that curved shape. That is true, but that shape is also missing the firmness that we need to play, because if you just take this shape and you translate it to the piano, it collapses instantly because this just puts it in the right shape. It doesn't help us stay there, right? So now we're keeping our fingers curved of our own volition, not letting them drape across a fist, okay? And we take the other hand, put pressure on those knuckles from the other side, just a little bit, like the tiniest bit, just so you can feel that the fingers move. And then we want to remind ourselves, okay, when we start, keep that hand there, and then play the first note. Can you play this next note? And then let your left hand go. And see, does this little reminder, you're going to have to slow your tempo down, and that's okay. Does this little reminder help us remember after the left hand is gone to stay there? So, Alan, if we were working together, I would suspect that while you address this, and this doesn't have to be every minute of your practice from now on, forever and ever. It's not like that. We don't want this. You've already played a lot of music. I want you to keep experiencing music and keep playing repertoire. We're just going to fix this in the, almost like the back end, right? We're going to fix it behind the scenes, if you will. So if you want to work on this piece, I would bet you would need to take this tempo. Those are the 16th notes. And that is okay. Because it's actually a remarkable amount to think about when we have to change the execution. We have to be acutely aware that this isn't dropping like that, right? We want to keep it raised. So we're spending a lot of time talking about this because as soon as the bridge comes up and is in that really good place, healthy place, this scale, and the scales were what you asked me about last time, the scale is going to fly. Because most of our motion is now going to be down and into the key and not a lift and then a down and into the key. We're almost, in effect, cutting our motions by 50%. That immediately, I mean, you can see how much more efficient that is and how much quicker you're going to be able to play through all of this stuff, both hands. Because this will be aiding us. Here's another exercise you could do. You could just take a 5-finger pattern in C, same key as the piece is in, and can you play through the 5-finger pattern and not have this happen, right? Get a camera out. Get your phone out that you probably use to record the video. Record yourself. Record 5 minutes or less, or 2 minutes or something, and keep tabs on your progress. And do you see the bridge as you go through a 5-finger pattern? Is it stay good? Don't spend forever playing a 5-finger pattern. Maybe try a few keys, call it a day, move on, work on some of the things in this piece. Like I would suggest some of the more difficult scalar passages. So, for example, this one that starts here and goes through here. Because it's almost like we almost get a trill. We also have to play through the 4th finger, which is its own challenge. And then we finish with a scale. So there's 3 really major components that one bar can work on for us. Trilling with kind of 4 and 3 and 2 and 3. And then playing a scale. And can we go slow enough that the bridge stays strong? Yes. Another thing you can try, Alan, to make sure to double check, because you're working on your own, to double check that as you work on strengthening this. It's so interesting describing piano technique because there's relatively little muscle that we use to play. But we talk about words like strong, which imply like force. And it's not really about that. But a strong bridge, let's think about it this way. It doesn't take muscle to keep the hand here. It really, more than anything, just takes awareness. Awareness of where this needs to stay, and then becoming accustomed to that. There is a little bit of structure there in the hand to withstand the impact of each. But what's really important, and that this is kind of a potential pitfall, and it's something I see students fall into, is that when we try to fix this and bring it up, also, students tend to push because we're trying to keep this strong. And so there ends up being a lot of pushing down into the keys after we play, which will also slow us down and fix nothing. So in the meantime, while you're practicing, keeping the bridge in a good arch, right? Can you take your other hand once in a while? And can you lift this hand off the keys? So that the weight of our arm is, no, it's not that much. It's a couple pounds. Yes, I'm glad you like that, Sinden. So if this is dead weight, the arm that we're working on, and the other hand comes in and lifts it, we should be able to feel in the other hand how much weight there is, right? But we should still be able to lift our arm away. And if I was your teacher and they're in person, I might randomly come over to the piano while you're playing and go, boop, and can I lift your hand away? Sometimes you can see it. As a teacher, I can see if somebody's bearing down and into the keys. And other times it's not quite as obvious. But this is something you can do yourself. Take the other hand. And if you are really pushing while you play through these scales, I don't think you are right now, but when we try to change the bridge, if that happens and you try to lift with the other arm, you're going to feel you're not going to be able to lift the hand you're playing with off the keyboard, or it's going to take a lot more effort than if it's just, if there's no extra weight. So this other thing that I'm doing now, this shaking on a note, you might see some people, some performers trying to make vibrato happen on the piano. And this is not that. They might do it expressively if you see an artist or a concert pianist do this. But we can also use this to help encourage freedom in the playing mechanism. So while we're adding structure here, yes. So while we're adding structure in the hand, we're making sure that everything else is loose. Okay. That was a really big thing that I wanted to touch on, Alan. Let's have a quick talk about tempos in Clementi. Your tempo is already really great. I know, so if you go and you Google this piece or you look for it on Spotify or on YouTube, you will probably hear people play that sort of tempo. That would be completely historically incorrect. That is kind of a showing off or just not being aware of the correct tempo to play most of Clementi's music, and this sonatina in particular. So Ellen, your tempo is about quarter note equals, I'd say like 100, 102. And historically researched accurate tempi for this movement would be between 108 and 126, depending on your interpretation. I have an interesting quote here. A lot of Clementi's markings were influenced by Mozart's father, Leopold. Leopold was really we don't talk about him a lot because of Wolfgang, his son that became so prolific. But his father was really the one that got his son involved in performing and such an early age and going all over the place. And he was also a wonderful musician. Let's see. Not like Wim Winters, because I'm not suggesting double beat. So Leopold Mozart defined allegro, which is in many editions of the Clementi sonatina, for the Sonatina 3. The marking is allegro and or spiritoso. Those are the two words. Leopold Mozart said allegro is a gay but not over fast tempo. Direct quote. And spiritoso, again, direct quote from Mozart. Spiritoso means that one should play with intelligence and spirit, a mean between fast and slow, and the piece itself. That's a great question, Rhodesy. Clementi references Leopold Mozart so much that I want to say yes. I don't know that for a fact. But I would really suggest yes. So, not overly fast. So, sprightly, but not overly fast. And a mean between fast and slow, played with intelligence and spirit. Which instantly means it's not going to be. That's just crazy fast. So let me give you a little bit of both of those tempi, the bottom and the top of the range. This is 108. Okay, you get the idea. And that is nearly, Alan, that's nearly the tempo that you played. You might be just a couple beats per minute slower than that. And on the upper end, this is 126. Okay. Yes. Rhodes, that's a perfect description. You say it sounds happy and joyful, not just rushed. And I think that's perfect. I have a little bit of trouble myself feeling the spirit of the piece closer to 108, the slower tempo. I feel it more at the faster end, but I definitely don't think it needs to be any faster. We can add so much character, and we can really make sure that we're actually playing all the articulations well. Staccatos in one hand, now both hands, now legato, staccato, hold, staccato, staccato. There's articulations all over the place that are varied and changed throughout the hands, and we can really hear them and hear they impact the character of the piece when it's not overly fast. Anytime, by the way, so many of you have played Clementi. If you ever play Clementi, take care to try to find... it's hard to tell what would be a good authoritative recording of Clementi. Try to find one that doesn't feel like it's supposed to be on a concert stage today. And I'll just show all of you right now. I have this wonderful book, which is actually, it contains the revised editions of the Clementi sonatinas, which aren't played very much. This was just published maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And it has half of the book are historical notes. Almost half the book, like a good third of the book, are historical notes. I don't know if you can see that, but this page is full of text. There's no music, and there's like 40 pages of just text and research about the 6 sonatinas in Opus 36 with references to Clementi's own book on how to play pianoforte and references to Leopold Mozart and a bunch of other great historical figures to help us interpret that. By the way, this is edited by Arthur Houle. That's Houle. So you can Google that. It is not available for free like the rest of the scores would be on IMSLP, but if you enjoy the sonatinas and you want that reference, that's okay, Alan, that's okay. Alfred it's probably a good addition. But yeah, this would be, it's a little expensive for these 6 pieces that are so highly played. I think this was like $40 US. But if you want that historical information and you want the notation from the revised editions, everybody plays the first edition of Clementi. There are actually 6 editions. The notes themselves are very different throughout the editions. So this has different notes in it than the first edition. That doesn't mean the first edition is wrong. In fact, more people play first edition than any other ones. And if you look at the RCM repertoire and others, they still ask for the first edition to be played. Hello, OCD King. Sure, Alan, yeah. Try it when you start number 5. And you can, yeah, feel free to use, it's a fantastic resource. Okay. I just had one more comment, Alan. And that is, take care to explore the dynamics so much more than you currently are. Let's hear a really, really big difference between forte and piano. Forte in Clementi can actually be quite strong. Think about it being, oh gosh. It's hard to put it in context. Let's say this is a comfortable dynamic. And this is what we want to play when we just sit down and we don't think about playing. That would be mezzo piano. Here's mezzo forte. Here's forte. So there is a brightness to it, and that is really important in all of Clementi's music. It also leaves plenty of room if we can play those fortes out. That whole phrase that I just played is piano. So now we have that really dramatic difference between and. Right? And there's plenty of room to make crescendi. Yes? So really, I would explore the higher end of the dynamic because your pianos are already really good. They're nice. They're pleasant to listen to. They're a nice color. Yes. Yes. But then when we need to play forte, we're going to work on. Right? So we can feel we're not digging in, but we can sink in more. And you see all of these, they're not being played with fingers like this. Because if I only play with fingers, I can't really play all that loud. So there's a lot of bouncing in the arm and in the wrist. Yeah. Yes. Oh, I love this sonatina. Great stuff. Ellen, do you have any questions for me? You've done great work. I hope if you can incorporate, one of these things a little bit at a time every day, it'll be great. But you've already done such wonderful work. So let's give Alan another round of applause. Oh, yeah. Good stuff. Clementi, it just doesn't get old. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, Alan, if you don't have any questions, we can move on to the next part of the stream. Oh, welcome, Julio. I see you here. Yes, a lot of information. I hope you can come back to the video and reference it again, and hopefully there's plenty of there for you to work on, at least for the next week, if not longer. And Nancy, yeah, the Schirmer edition. That's what I'm using on my iPad that I showed to everybody while we were talking about this. Yes, great. Before we open the stream up to complete Q&A, there was one other question that came in. Antonio. Antonio's still here. Oh, you said spiritoso means witty. I like that. That adds such a great character. That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Antonio had emailed me a question from a book that you're reading. Oh, I'm not connected to the internet with this. Maybe it's still here. No, it's not still here. Let me see if I can pull it up somewhere else. Okay. What is the book is called? Fundamentals of Piano, it looks like. And there is a extensive 3 paragraphs on, I think I can summarize it by saying, using the playing of chords to speed something like an Alberti bass pattern. Okay, and what this particular book is stating to do is that if we just try to play Alberti bass, so this is 1, 5, 3, 5, 1, 5, 3, 5. I'm just in the key of C. And we try to speed this up, and our technique isn't built well, or it's not yet developed. We're going to hit a wall where we can no longer play it beyond a certain speed. That speed might be around here for someone earlier in their playing journey. And especially if we aren't incorporating a variety of technique. Now, what the book says to do in order to speed that up is to learn how to play chords at the same speed you'd like to play this Alberti bass pattern. And that the chords will help you learn how to execute the single finger motions. So let's dissect that a little bit. This will be helpful for everybody here. What happens when I'll shift over and do it with the right hand so it's in front. What happens when we play chords? We can see a couple things. I know C major. Oh, let's change that. At least to, that's better. So whenever we play chords, there is whole arm movement. And there's a pivot at the elbow. And there's also a little bit of a flick of the wrist. And there's finger articulation. All three of those things happen. This is the piece that's in the book that I agree with, Antonio, is that this kind of thing, this motion, will help you play this. Because, and this is something I've actually mentioned using different words. Sometimes, like when we talked, I think when Alan and I talked 2 weeks ago about scales, playing detached scale. Some of my students that are here know this as well. When we play a detached scale, we're activating the same mechanism that book describes. So you can see there's a pivot at the elbow, there's a little throw from the wrist, but there's also a cushion. And the fingers stay relaxed. We go back and play this. It's a very similar motion. I don't think that you need to relegate yourself to playing a chord to work on this. You can still play and work on hearing actually what you'd like the end result to be, which in this case is an Alberti bass pattern. But what we're doing is the same motion. We're playing it detached. So my tendency would be to skip the step about playing chords and just play individual notes, because we don't want the hand to get locked and to do this, because when we try to unlock it and then play single pitches, we're probably going to still have remnants of the claw, which is not good. We don't want the claw in our playing, right? And unless you have a lot of body awareness, it's difficult to differentiate what it feels like for the fingers to be loose but activated and stuck and not activated, because the end result is almost exactly the same. What we hear is almost exactly the same. So, in principle, I like the idea that the book presents about using more. The general idea is we use more of the playing mechanism to articulate each note. And that's something I also teach, playing things detached. Yeah, so Antonio says, when you read the chapter, you start playing the chord and then separate the fingers to increase speed. Because, yeah, I know, the book says that a chord is 100% speed. Like when we play all the fingers together, we're playing Alberti bass at infinite speed, which is, I wouldn't agree with that. There are things in the book that I do agree with. And Bethany, I think it was called, I can find it. Fundamentals of Piano, or maybe Fundamentals of Piano Technique. So even if we separate out, let's say, an Alberti bass pattern and we play it very fast, that feels nothing like playing a chord. They're very different sensations. So the overlap is that learning to play a chord, fundamentals of piano practice. Thanks, Antonio. The overlap is that playing a chord, we can learn how to activate more than just the fingers. That can be valuable. But I think that those particular 3 paragraphs they really only pertain to early technique. And once we can learn how to separate this out, Sinden, the author, Antonio just listed the author, Chon Si Chang. Yeah, it's in his comment there. Once we can separate these notes and still play with the full mechanism. Thanks, Road CSE Major. Okay, once we can play detached, we're going to move on to a very different technique in order to speed up Alberti bass. Because truly, the thing that is completely missing from there, and rightfully so, it's at the beginning of the book. The book is intended, I think, to take you through a really long journey of technical development. And yes, things need to be done at stages. But don't be under the impression that this leads to that, because they're very different. What we really incorporate to play Alberti bass faster is rotation. Yes, and that's not mentioned at all in those paragraphs. But before we can incorporate rotation really well, we have to understand how to activate the mechanism for one attack. So, Antonio, there's my review of those 3 paragraphs. I agree about playing a chord. I agree about feeling the fingers working together. I agree about getting the rest of the mechanism engaged up to the elbow, even beyond, and feeling how it all works together. But as soon as you can, I would separate it out to individual notes as you practice, or as you want to learn how to play an Alberti bass pattern, if you're working on something like that. Because this is, I wouldn't do that for more than a few weeks if you really need to. Because there's a much greater risk of getting locked into something that we don't want, rather than taking the most important thing from it. And the most important thing is the activation of more of the body. So it's not like the holy grail of playing quickly, but it's definitely a good start, and it kind of lays the foundation without telling you why it works. Because of all that, I question now how accurate the rest of the information is in the book. It might be great. And that's the trouble with writing a book, is that you have to present things. You have to think about how you present things in an order. And every student needs a different order, and they need something more than something else. And Antonio says, of course, you're not going to play Alberti bass. I know that's not your style, Antonio. So that's always the risk with books that talk about technique, especially really specifics about technique, is you have to, as the author, you just have to kind of take a guess about where a student might be. And it might be a very educated guess by that author from many years of experience. It's still not going to serve every student that comes across it. It's not going to serve them all equally well. So, Rhodesy says there's probably hundreds of piano techniques. There are some different ones. Yeah, there are a couple different ones. But really, all of the really successful ones, the ones that allow you to keep playing, so not like what Glenn Gould did. So those of you that don't know, Glenn Gould had to give up publicly performing because he literally couldn't play for more than, I think, about 15 minutes because of his technique and posture. We don't want to emulate that. We can argue about his interpretations all day. But that is one example of a genius pushing through some really poor technique. So the technique that I see that works really well uses the body in a really efficient way. Whether that happens to be the Taubman approach or something slightly different, I don't subscribe to one more than another one or anything like that. We just want to find the ways to use our hands and our arms and our legs, even when we play, believe it or not, to make music happen needing the least effort. Nothing at the piano should be effortful. And I've said this before, and I even read this in the book, Antonio, like in the first, very early in the book. I read a couple other pages. And it's something that Neuhaus also talks about. Neuhaus is a very famous teacher. He taught Richter that a 4-year-old child has all of the strength and body development to play virtuosically at the piano. The handspan might not be there to play some of the big repertoire, but everything else is already there. They just need to learn coordination. That's very telling. So piano playing should feel easy. Sinden, where is Penelope? Where do you find her? Does she have her own channel? I can't remember if she has her own or if she's on hosted on one of the other platforms on YouTube. I'm very sure I've seen her name come up, though. Okay, she does have her own channel. Great. All right. Oh, just to wrap up the book thing, Antonio, you said the thing with the book is it's hard to visualize what's described, and I agree with that. So hopefully this kind of showed you that intention and also helped to put it in a broader perspective about what the goal of playing in chords, what the goal is there. Yeah. Okay. So we've got some other questions. Yeah, we can have some free questions for a bit. Let's say 15, 20 minutes or so, and then I've got to run. But Julio, welcome, Julio. I see your question. If you've got some questions, now is the time to drop them in the chat. I'll get to as many as I possibly can. Julio says, when you're playing arpeggios using left hand, the fingers that are not being used tend to stretch and twitch and stick up a bit, which causes tension. How do you keep your other fingers calm? All right, Julio, I've been giving exercises like this out a lot lately, and I was never a huge fan of them when I was younger, but I'm growing to like them in teaching. Okay, we're going to start with the left hand, right? You said? Yeah. Go to just our C 5-finger position. We're going to depress all of 5 notes. You can play them or press them silently. So I've just pressed them down silently. They're all down. Now we're going to go 1 finger at a time down the hand. So I'm going to start with thumb. The other 4 fingers are going to stay in the key. Thumb is going to play and pulse. You can even hear the sympathetic resonance maybe from the other fingers still being down. Now replace the thumb, move to the 2nd finger. Throughout all of these, this hand, left hand, should not be pushing into the keys. It shouldn't feel like it's really tense. But we want the fingers to stay at the bottom of the key. And then we can pulse with each finger. 1 and 2 are going to be relatively easy. 3 is next. Let's mute that. Here's 3. And then we go to 4. And then 5. Don't play this more than piano or pianissimo. And don't do it for more than 2 to 3 minutes a day per hand. Okay? So this is working on keeping all of those fingers that we're not using. The goal is that we are not activating them at all. They're in the key so that they're not being allowed to stick up and do strange stuff and cause tension, right? But the goal is that they feel silent. Not only do they sound silent because they're not playing, but they feel silent in that the muscles are doing nothing except staying where we put them, and then we pulse around them per finger. I would work on a technique like that, and there are ways that we can expand that to even more advanced concepts, but that's a great one to start with. And you'll probably find releasing, depressing all 5 fingers, let's do them silently, and then releasing 4. Can't even see it on the screen, but here, the 4 is depressed, then release 4, and then we're going to play with 4. That is going to be challenging. So that alone is going to give you plenty to work on, Julio. Let's jump over. But Julio, don't really don't spend more than like 2 minutes a day on it. More than that, and it's just not engaging for the ear, and it could be potentially not healthy to work on that type of movement for too long, especially if it's not being done in a perfectly healthy way. Alan, thank you so much, Alan. I really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. Okay, OCD King sent the next question in. Let's see, you said you're very much a beginner with as few as 2 keys being played. I can hear that one finger may beat another just slightly. Any tips on getting multiple keys to play at the same time? First tip for you, OCD King. Do you find that one of the fingers, let's just say, for example, we're playing with 1 and 3, and here I'm playing G and B. Does one of the fingers always tend to get to the chord first? Like, is it the 3rd finger? Like that? Or is it the thumb? And if it is regularly the same finger that's early, focus on the other one. So if it's the thumb that's early, focus on playing the 3rd finger primarily and allowing the thumb to play with the 3rd finger. And if it's the other way around, we flip the thinking. If 3rd finger always beats us, then focus on the thumb being the leader and let the 3rd finger follow. So that would be the first thing I'd take a look at, OCD King. Of course, every finger combination. We can go through all of those. And chords, triads, same thing, just one finger beat. What finger is beating the other fingers? Focus on the weakest one, the one that's always the latest, and make the other fingers follow that one. The other thing is more of a conceptual thing, I think, in that this isn't exactly true, but I find that it works. So it physically, according to how the instrument behaves, the sound we get does not happen precisely at the time that we feel the keys go down. It's shifted by a little bit. But if we focus on playing to the bottom of the key or feeling the key bed, not pushing through it, but feeling the bottom of the key, so that we're not in this amorphous kind of like wiggle room place where we're playing only partway down on the key or something like that. But we feel the bottom of the key, and then we feel the bottom of the key with both fingers or with all 3 fingers, all 4 fingers, all 5. So we're always making sure that we feel that we strike not from the key surface, but that they all meet at the bottom, almost feeling like the part under the piano is what we're aiming for. And they all happen together simultaneously. Try a combination of those 2 things. The second one is more of a psychological way of just maybe changing perception of how we think about it. And sometimes perception does change how we actually attack something, how we play it. And then the other way is a more kind of practical, straightforward approach. Find the lazy finger, find the weak finger, and make it be the leader. Have it lead the chord so we can get everything sounding together. I hope that helps, OCD King. Let us know. Rhodesy says, a Chopin method on technique, isn't that the closest to biology of the human body? I agree that some of the videos on the Chopin method are really great, and I think that's even the name of the channel. They're really, really wonderful Yeah, and it's a very, very healthy way to approach playing the piano. So I'm a big fan of the Chopin technique. Yes. And he, you could almost even say he was the founder of Taubman, in a sense, well before it was codified into what it is today. Everything that he taught, it aligns remarkably with that method. So alignment of the hand, of the fingers, alignment of the mechanism, how we move the hand to get prepared to play, where the anchors are in the hand, being over the middle fingers, 2 and 3. That's all really great stuff. Yeah. Bethany says, how would you play octave tremolos without creating tension? You have to do 16ths, quarter notes a little over 100. Let's see what that sounds like. Bethany, what key are you in, by the way? That might have a little bit of an impact. But pick an octave for me. What octave? Okay. We'll start with G flat. Oh, you said A. Okay, well, that's pretty good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, let me just double check. That's quarter note at 100. Let's make it 106. You said a little over 100. This is mostly about rotation back and forth. Almost like I have a student working on the Pathétique. So it's got a lot of very fast. Rosie said use the pedal to cover it up. Right hand, okay. So this is all about rotation. I brought up my student because he likes to call it a wiggle. And that works for him. So there's the overhead. So if I slow that down, you can see how much rotation there is between thumb side, 5th finger side. So I call it rotation. It's forearm rotation. Or you could call it wrist rotation. Some people call it that too. You could also think about it being like a shake. And you can see that further up in my arm. I think you can see a little bit of that. Now I'm way faster than I need to be. But a little shake. But the basis is in rotation. If we try to do this holding still and play with fingers, we're going to get tense quickly. We might be able to play one bar of that exceptionally softly with just fingers. But as soon as we need to do that for an extended time, I can already feel things getting tense as I try to speed up with just fingers. And I have to add in rotation. And now you can see this part of my arm wiggling. That would be my main suggestion, Bethany. Octave tremolo. There it is. There he is. Chris. Wiggle is better than tremor. I agree with that. I think, yeah, tremor sounds like, it doesn't sound metered. It sounds kind of unpredictable, right? Yes. Rotsi, I would think about, not in this case, I wouldn't anchor the pinky. If we need to learn rotation from the beginning and we're really unfamiliar with it, then yes, I teach rotation from the pinky like this, where we always are rotating toward pinky, 5th finger, and then down to the other fingers. But if we're not super new to rotation, I would feel rotation around the anchor of the hand, which would be under 2nd and 3rd fingers. So if it's right in the top of the palm here, so if our anchor is here, that's the point around which I'm rotating. Yeah. Great. Yeah, Bethany says you forgot that the resting arm exists. Yeah. Yeah, let this be free. And this, we shouldn't be trying to wave it around. Don't do that. But let it, it's almost like a shock absorber for us. So whatever the wrist and the forearm need to do to execute this really comfortably, this just moves in sympathy. Yeah, if that makes sense. But we're not trying to move it. It's just there, acting like a shock absorber. Thank you, Christopher. Thanks. I appreciate it. Oh, let's go back. Let's see. Okay. Nathaniel. Hello, Nathaniel. Nathaniel says, when trying to play fast in piano, you feel that you hold your arm up and you don't really sink into the keys. That might not be as bad of a thing as you think it is, at least based on reading it and not seeing what you're doing. That is kind of how I would describe a good way of playing fast and quietly. We cannot let too much drop into the keys because dropping is always a big sound. If we're truly allowing gravity to take the hand and the arm and everything, it's always going to be forte. So playing very quietly, there's Clementi in D major instead of C. So we can say that this is fairly fast passage, right? So as I'm playing that, yes, I'm not thinking of holding the arm up, but I'm thinking about letting the fingers float on top of the keys. Now, yes, I think at an earlier stage in practice, we need to feel the key bottom and still feel it at a nice dynamic. But when it comes to playing faster and faster and faster, virtuosic playing is exceptionally light. That is one of the biggest things that differentiates the great virtuosos from a lot of other pianists, is that they know exactly how to lighten everything. So even if it's just a scale, I'm not thinking about sinking into the key bottom. I'm just letting the hand and arm float. So the arm is kind of, if I do this above the keys, the arm is carrying me, but I'm not going down, 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 down into every note. There's just a little bit of finger articulation that helps to play. But I would think about it as floating and not lifting away. Again, purely for psychological reasons. Float inspires us to feel a different way than lifting. Lifting pulls us away from the keyboard, and it almost makes us take a breath in, which is not helpful, holding our breath, right? Rhodesy, thanks. I hope that helps, Nathaniel. And if you have a more in-depth question about that, send in a video, because I'd love to take a closer look at exactly what you're talking about. But just based on your description, I don't think that's a bad thing. Sindin, your question. What is your approach to teaching older students? I have great theory, but coordination on fast pieces is sometimes difficult. Sindin, if I had to boil it down, I try to employ a variety and teach a variety of practice techniques that over time and with work at them will allow you to play more difficult things more quickly and allow the hands to work together. So a lot of those techniques, some of them are going slow enough, but not all of them. And I know you've probably heard that before. There is value in always going slow enough that you can execute everything. But there's also value in pushing yourself and challenging yourself and pushing the tempo just a hair. And there's value in finding So let's see. If Graham Fitch says to always play at the tempo of no mistakes, I like that. I would add to that the fastest tempo of no mistakes. Because playing extraordinarily slow works on a couple things, but it doesn't work on everything. And finding that point where we can play up to our limit of what we're capable of today, finding that point and then dedicating our time to that whatever beats per minute that is today, that is going to pay many more dividends than playing extraordinarily slower. But we still want to try to get everything right. And so if I were working with you in person, we would spend time together finding that tempo, and we'd be talking about what it feels like. And it would be different. Yes. So, Sinden, you say Mozart. It would be different probably for different passages. It would be different for different types of technique. It may even be different within Alberti bass when the voicing or the inversion of the Alberti bass changes. That changes how it feels to perform it and to play it. And so we would be analyzing all of those things, and I would boil this down. I wouldn't teach it any differently to an adult student than to a dedicated teenager, let's say. It might be different for a really young student, but we'd be talking about finding those tempi and learning what they feel like, learning what it feels like to challenge yourself by 4 beats per minute, pulling back the tempi, and also learning what it really means to break things into valuable practice chunks. So I have a video on the channel called, I think it's called Bite-Sized Repetition. And the thumbnail has a little pretzel bite on it. And that is the premise of that video. And I kind of explain it, but I explain it as I can in about 10 minutes. But as I teach it one-on-one, I could talk sometimes for 30 minutes about the same topic. We could experiment for a long time. And one phrase that I've been using more and more the past month or two is micro chunks in practice. So taking things literally maybe as few as 2 notes at a time in a micro chunk, maybe as few as 4 notes. And again, it all really depends on the context. So, and I don't mean the piece in general, I mean like the particular phrase and what the problem is that we're trying to solve. How we approach fixing it, I would have to see in order to really give the most pertinent advice, let's say. Alan, Alan, your question that you just put in relates. You say, is there any merit in playing very, very fast but inaccurately? There can be in extremely small doses, like 1 pass-through of a phrase. Because 1 pass-through of a phrase helps teach us, it helps show us how much we've learned since the last time we tried it. We have to experiment to find out how our technique is improving and how everything that we're trying is improving, and to find out, do I need to shift my focus? The thing that will 100% always be true is that slow practice will never lead to performance tempo. The only way to try to lead to performance tempo and understand it, unless the whole piece is slow to begin with, but if it's something faster, if it's an etude, we have to experiment. We have to push tempo because our technique it has to change to perform things at faster tempo. So while we try in every repetition to be as accurate as possible, there is a lot of value in taking 1, no more than that, to go try performance tempo or try 90% of performance tempo if performance tempo is too fast. And experiment. When we experiment like that, we can fine-tune exactly what we need to work on when we take the tempo back. Yeah, but every repetition we do that's inaccurate will also start to ingrain poor finger coordination, or finger coordination that is going to be not what we want when we finish working on a piece or when we need to perform it. Hey, Sir Wolseley. Phase I'm going to come back to your question. I'm not sure I know exactly what you mean with your abbreviations, but I'm going to try to hit the other questions I got and then come back to that one. Okay. Sinden, I hope that was helpful. I mean, I hope the general ideas were helpful. I know it wasn't a very particular answer. So once again, feel free to send a video in, and I'm always happy to look at a spot in particular, and we can address exactly what the issues are. Oh, Nancy said, don't forget to hit the thumbs up. I'll just repeat that. Thanks, Nancy. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up. Fair to middling says, new here. Well, welcome. I'm an advanced beginner trying to get more into intermediate pieces, mostly classical. What is the best thing for me to do to get over the hump? Sight reading, play slower, or something else? The best thing to do is just go for it. Working on sight reading is great, but sight reading isn't going to help you necessarily play more advanced repertoire more easily. Learning the more advanced repertoire is going to help your sight reading. I would say sight reading it always lags behind, but we're going to improve sight reading more by challenging ourselves with the repertoire we choose. Play slower. Always do that for the reasons that we talked about just now. There will be things that you're comfortable with in the more advanced. You're not going to jump to something that is crazy. So find the things that you're least comfortable with and spend most of your time focusing on those in the pieces. For example, I last year I was trying to learn Chopin's First Ballade, and it fell off my radar because I had too many other projects. But when I do work on it once every great while, I jump straight to the coda. If I don't have a lot of time, I know the coda is the hardest thing. And most of my practice is going to be that tempo. So slow and musical. And I won't spend time on the rest of the piece unless I have the time. So I'm always going to jump straight to the spot that is going to by far need the most work. And you can do the same thing. So find those spots that are least comfortable and jump to those, work on them slowly. And yeah, I think that's the best advice I could give. Let's see. Okay, I think I've covered a lot of these. Eccles Soul says, Clementi was who inspired learning C major first, right? that might be true. At least half of Opus 36 is in C major, which is, yeah, Chopin would have hated that. Thanks, Christopher, for tuning in. I'm just catching up on the chat, so thanks. Rotzi, you asked, what are your thoughts on you as a composer pianist? That's a really open-ended question, Rotzi. Rotzi, let me say, I think that you have a great gift, and especially your ears. You have a great gift for hearing things and putting them and creating your own music, especially around ideas, let's say, that you're familiar with from the music you like romantic classical music. And that, without study, is great. That's really great. Because you haven't done as far as I know, you haven't done really any formal music study. So that's wonderful. I would capitalize on that. Like if we were working together, I would say we would give a lot of focus of lessons toward using that, which is a strength of yours, to help everything else come along. So using listening examples and listening to pieces to talk about very, very small things like, what effect does this cadence have in measure 30? And learn compositionally, but not just the theory behind it, but what does it make us feel? Because that's, I think, what you're really tuned into, is how it makes you feel. And so I would work on that and keep that as the core of music, and then we would kind of build everything else up around that. So, yeah. That's your answer, Rootsy. Let's see. Okay, I've gotten back to Faze-ish's question. So you say the cliche descending harmonic minor, natural minor mix. Oh, so harmonic minor, right, on the top. Oh, are you talking about at the end of the... No, not at the end of the ballade. Probably not. But just a scale? The ballade ends with... That's actually a melodic minor scale. So if that's what you're talking about, you say, what goal tempo would you start one? Let me put my metronome on, because you're saying 115 to 120. Yeah. Mid 80s. If we're talking about the ballade in particular, it would be in the mid 80s. But so you're talking about Opus 55, but it could be anything. Oh gosh, you know, Faze, I wouldn't. There's a big part of me that would not put a metronome marking on that, but we would do it by feel, and feeling a lingering, and then keeping the rest of it under it with enough control. But I wouldn't want to, if it's supposed to be a gesture, and musically and compositionally supposed to be a gesture, I wouldn't want to put it on a grid. That speeds up, because it'll no longer be a gesture, it'll be an exercise. So instead, I would probably ask you to linger, lean on, hesitate, and then feel like you've kind of pushed a snowball down the hill, if that makes sense. But I wouldn't put it on a grid. So if that's what we're talking about, a scale that just accelerates as it goes down, we want it to feel like we give it a little push. It hangs almost like, think about like a roller coaster too, like those ones that hang at the top. And if you're in that first car, you're just like dangling over the edge. We're there, and then we go flying down. And there's no way that you can, it's like a parabolic acceleration. And we can't put it on a grid. That would be too mathematical. It wouldn't be as exhilarating, right? Same thing with the music. So I hope that helps, Faze. Okay, I've almost caught up. Let's see, Fair to Middling said, also, should I be doing exercises like Hannon? And I saw Nancy replied, yes, fair to middling. Check out my videos on Hannon because I'm not a fan. And I've had a few live streams where I rant about that. And I know some of you that are here have heard that, so I don't want to rant about it again. But check out those videos. I'm a big fan of Hannon Faber, that book. There is also, I like it. I'll say that. I like it. There, of course, are ways of introducing the same concepts via repertoire, but I find that it just is so much easier to understand if we have a dedicated exercise. OCD King says, a few, yeah. Roadsy, you say you got an album coming, 6 pieces based on a forest you used to visit as a child. That's really great. Really cool inspiration. You'll have to make sure that that we get to hear it. Faze, you said it's the opposite. Does it slow down? Faster to slower. Okay. Think about that maybe a little differently. As can you feel musically? Can you feel resistance pushing against you? Same principle. We're not putting it on a grid, but to get a slowdown, instead of trying to chop it up and say I've got to play this tempo and then I'm going to, get slower and retard. And instead of thinking that way, we just have. I'm using the same scale. I don't know if that's the one that's in there, but I am feeling a almost like emotionally a pressure against the music. So if we start quickly, so like there is this force pushing the music to slow down, and there's a lot of force behind it. And so I'm feeling that push against me rather than saying, I'm going to slow it down, which isn't as intense. It doesn't give that big moment. The arrival means nothing, right? So if we start faster and I just slow down, that's very bland. But if I feel a push, the result is different. It's still slowing down, but there is so much more underneath it. Okay. Alan, you said you use that Hannon Faber and you transposed all 12 keys. Good for you. That's great. Beautiful. Okay. This is perfect. I think I got through all the questions and we can wrap up. And yeah, wonderful. So as always, thank you everybody for being here. If you haven't clicked the thumbs up button, click the thumbs up button. If you would ever like to submit a video like we watched at the beginning of the stream, there is a link, a little description and how to get that to me down below this video. Roadsy says, play us off. What should I play? No, don't answer that question. You know what I'll play? I'll play a little Mendelssohn for us, since I've been working on it. So, here's Opus 19, number 1. And yeah, feel free to stick around. I'll be signing off as soon as I finish this, and hopefully I won't make too many mistakes. Ah, okay. Thanks for the request, Rhodesy. All right. Practice smarter, not harder. And I'll see you all in the next stream. We'll be here again in about 2 weeks. All right. Bye-bye.